This podcast is brought to you by the American Enterprise Institute.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, review, and share.
Thanks for listening. Here's our show.
What in the hell's going on?
What the hell is going on?
What the hell is going on?
I don't know what the hell he's talking about.
You don't have to know what the hell is on it.
What the hell's the matter with these guys?
We don't know what's going on.
What the hell's going on?
Who in God's name knows what it's all about?
Hi, I'm Danielle Pletka.
And I'm Mark Thiessen.
Welcome to our podcast, What the Hell is Going On? Mark, who the hell is Joe Biden going to pardon next? Maybe you.
I wouldn't hold my breath, but unlike his son, I don't need a pardon because I haven't committed any crimes.
There you go.
But I mean, this was just unbelievable. This is he said, you can go the litany over and over and over again of Joe Biden saying that he wouldn't do this. Karine Jean-Pierre, the most execrable, press secretary in the history of the White House press office, constantly saying he's not going to do it, never chance, wouldn't do it. The Democrats with their grandstanding about the rule of law. In fact, we got a little litany of Democrats talking about no one is above the law. Let's play that.
No one is above the law.
No one is above the law.
Nobody is above the law.
No one is above the law.
No one is above the law.
Nobody is above the law.
No one 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 is above the law.
It's like, no one is above the law, Danny, except for Hunter Biden.
Well, let me read everybody the full and unconditional pardon because it trips off the lips. For those offenses against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024, including but not limited to all offenses charged or prosecuted, including any that have resulted in convictions by Special Counsel David C. Weiss in the United States District Court for the District of Delaware and in the District Court for the Central District of California. In testimony whereof I have hereunto signed my name and caused the pardon to be recorded with the Department of Justice. Can you imagine a more sweeping period of time and a more sweepingly phrased pardon?
Well, what's fascinating is he didn't just pardon him for the gun crimes. He didn't just pardon him for the tax evasion. He pardoned him for all the crimes for which he has not been charged even yet, relating to all the influence peddling that he was engaged in. And the start of the pardon goes back to his start of his tenure at Burisma.
Shocking. Remind everybody what Burisma is.
Is the Ukrainian energy company that he was on the board of and where he was influence peddling using his father's name. And what that means is, by implication, it kills all the cases that might have brought Joe Biden into legal peril as well and exposed some of his potential crimes, because he claimed that he's completely, not only has he lied about the pardon, he lied about not meeting Hunter's business associates. He lied about all sorts of things, never discussing his business dealings with Hunter. That's all been exposed, largely by our friend Peter Schweitzer, who was just on the podcast recently. But here's the thing that I wanted to focus on a little bit here, Danny, because I want to read part of his statement before you read the pardon. Let me read this part here. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision making, and I kept my word even as I have watched my son being selectively, unfairly prosecuted. It is clear that Hunter was treated differently. The charges in his case came about only after several of my political opponents in Congress instigated them to attack me and oppose my election. Even as the case unraveled in the courtroom, a number of my political opponents in Congress were taking credit for bringing political pressure on the process. No reasonable person looks at the facts of Hunter's case can reach any other conclusion that Hunter was singled out only because he was my son, and that is wrong. He goes on to say it was a selective prosecution. Raw politics infected the process and led to a miscarriage of justice. He is describing his Justice Department. He is describing the Justice Department led by Merrick Garland, his Attorney General, as engaging in, oh my God, political prosecution. This validates everything that Donald Trump has said about the cases against him. How can you go around and say there's no politics going on in the Justice Department and going after Donald Trump when you're turning around and accusing your own justice officials that you appointed of politically prosecuting your own son?
Okay, so I want to share with everybody, and we'll put a link for this in to the congressional investigation of Hunter Biden. Let me just give you guys a taste of what it is that we have not in any way discussed in the public square. 2013, Hunter Biden, business associate, and Chinese investors agreed to create Bohai Harvest RST Equity Investment Fund Management Co., an investment fund controlled by the Bank of China. December 4th, 2013, Vice President Biden travels with Hunter Biden on Air Force Two to China and meets with the CEO of BHR, Jonathan Lee. Shortly thereafter, BHR's business license was approved and Hunter became a board member. February 5th, 2014, Hunter Biden met Kazakh oligarch Kenes Rakishev at the Hay Adams Hotel in D.C. In email correspondences with Devin Archer, that's Hunter's partner, surrounding the meeting, Rakishev requested Secretary of State John Kerry visit Kazakhstan. Guess what happened? February 14th, 2014, Russian oligarch Yelena Baturina, the wealthiest woman in Russia and then married to the former mayor of Moscow, wired the Rosemont Seneca Thornton bank account. Guess who's that? Company, $3.5 million. The beneficiary, Rosemont Seneca Partners, of which Hunter Biden was the chairman. Rosemont Seneca Thornton, 2 months later, is transferred $2,752,000 from Russia. March, $750,000. April, $3.5 million from the Kazakh thing. April 15th, 2014. Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company, appoints Biden business associate to their board of directors. Guys, I'm not even a quarter of the way through this. You know, we talk about grifters. It is a black stain on the American press corps that we do not all know this litany of corruption. You know, when I heard people call the Biden family, the Biden crime family, you know, the way they call the mafia, the Gotti crime family, I didn't like it because but when you read this, and I really recommend that you read this, when you read this, you realize that Biden's brother and Biden's son built an entire corrupt, illegal, non-registered foreign agent business around his vice presidency and presidency honestly, if I'm Donald Trump, this makes me look like a piker. I am humiliated. We didn't make enough money out of my last presidency. What? You know, they only got a little bit here and a little bit there. Look at the grift that went on for 8 solid years when Biden was vice president and then president. It is gross, and it should be the subject of the lead on every single night's news. Anyway, that was just my little rant for everybody, but we should go to our guest.
So I agree with you, Danny, but here's the thing. We're going to find out because now Hunter Biden cannot plead the fifth anymore.
Yeah, I don't agree.
And
I don't think that's going to happen.
I think there's going to be congressional investigations. I think that we're going to look into this. I think that this is not yet over. And quite frankly, it shouldn't be over. Because how can we not have the facts and the knowledge of this? Even if Hunter can't go to jail for all this, the American people ought to know the full truth of the legacy. And by the way, whether any of that money went to Joe Biden's pocket. Because that is something that, you know, unless he pardons himself before he leaves office, which may happen, it goes back to him. The other thing I just want to highlight here, because I think it's really important in perspective, is that Joe Biden didn't just lie to the American people about his intention. His spokeswoman, Karine Jean-Pierre, said that he changed his mind. This is the NBC News report, okay, on this. It says, the president has discussed pardoning his son with some of his closest aides at least since Hunter's conviction in June, said two people with direct knowledge of the discussions about the matter. They said it was decided at the time that he would publicly say he would not pardon his son, even though doing so remained on the table. So this wasn't just a lie, it was a premeditated lie. They knew that if he lost the election and this was going to be happening, he would do this at the very end of his administration. It was intended, and it's just a capstone on one of the most dishonest, corrupt presidential administrations I've ever seen in my lifetime.
And there you have it. Now, let's talk about that most corrupt administration and the pardon that was granted with our guest, Jonathan Turley. He's been on with us before. He's so great. We asked him to come back. He's the Shapiro Professor of Public Interest Law at George Washington University. He's also the director of the Environmental Law Advocacy Center and the executive director of the Project for Older Prisoners. He's been counsel in some of the most notable cases that you can look up. But more importantly yet, his latest book is Indispensable Right, Free Speech in an Age of Rage. Go and get it. It's great.
Here's our interview. Jonathan, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
It's so great to have you on again. So President Biden said he wouldn't do it, and then he did it. Walk us through this unbelievable pardon.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Danny. I actually think that the most shocking aspect of this pardon is that it's not shocking at all. And we've gotten to this sort of post-truth political moment where it doesn't matter what a president said. No one believed him when he said it, and nobody is shocked now. And that itself is something worthy of discussion. I mean, for Joe Biden, he's really always conveyed that telling a lie that no one believes is as good as telling the truth. And that seems to be the sort of logic here. But it wasn't just lying about the pardon. It was lying also in the last election about not knowing any of Hunter Biden's business associates or having met them, not knowing of any of his business dealings. Both of those are clearly shown, I think, now to have been lies. And then in this election, when he was still a candidate, lying about the fact that he would never pardon his son, and that was amplified by the White House. One of the most concerning aspects of the story is that NBC and other news organizations are saying that meetings were being held back in June about the pardon. That's when the White House was saying that it was not under consideration. So you have people in the White House who knew what the president was saying was an outright lie, that it was under consideration. The other aspect of this that I've written about is that the pardon sort of is the other shoe dropping. For the last year, I've been writing columns saying that Hunter Biden's defense made no sense at all. As a criminal defense attorney of 30 years, I've never seen anything like this. He was doing nothing but three-point shots. He didn't seem concerned at all about minimizing convictions or aggravating the potential sentence. That's only, as I noted in those columns, that's a strategy that you only do if you have a pocket pardon. You only take those types of risks if you know that at the end of the day, if nothing succeeds, I'm still going to get a clean slate.
No, I think that's exactly right, Jonathan, and thank you so much for joining us again. We are repeat offenders in the invitation department. So I think what you talk about is important. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't know, and this will be very familiar to you, is what Hunter actually not just did, but was alleged to have done, and what people were looking into. So one of the reasons why we see one of the broadest pardons since the pardon by Ford of Nixon, and over such an incredible breadth of time, is because it wasn't just the guns, it wasn't just the drugs, it wasn't just the tax evasion, it was also all of this foreign agent hanky-panky for the Chinese and for the Ukrainians. Can you talk at all about what you think people don't understand about how naughty Hunter really was?
Well, Danny, the language actually comes virtually out of the Nixon pardon. It's the same structure, but it's twice the period of time. We're talking about a 10-year period here for Biden. Of course, the biggest difference is that Gerald Ford was not implicated in the Nixon offenses. Joe Biden is. I mean, these allegations go into one of the largest influence peddling scandals in history. The Bidens have always been rather infamous for that. I've been writing about the Bidens from before the time when Joe Biden was vice president. They have been rather notorious, even in this city. And you're talking about millions of dollars that have gone to various Biden family members, including possibly the president. We don't know for sure, but we certainly know that the president repeatedly lied about his knowledge and his involvement with some of these people. And this pardon sweeps all of that away. It pardons his son for anything he might have done. I mean, if he has 6 heads in a duffel bag in his basement, he's covered, at least for federal offenses, but most of state offenses, the statute of limitations has run. So it is unprecedented in my view in that sense. It is certainly as sweeping as Nixon. It actually goes beyond the sweetheart deal that collapsed in court in Delaware. You know, that was a deal that the federal judge simply asked the prosecutor one question and said, have you ever seen in your long career as a prosecutor anyone ever given this type of deal? And he answered honestly and said no. And what was also amazing about that moment is that Hunter Biden's team, when asked if they wanted to just sort of tweak this deal to make it more, reasonable, they said, rip it up. And I wrote a column saying, as a criminal defense attorney, I've never heard of a defendant telling a prosecutor, rip up a deal when you are most certainly going to get convicted. And once again, that is only something you do if you believe you have a pocket pardon.
So let me ask a small, quick question, but then a follow-up. He issued this pardon for that 10-year period. He issued it on like Sunday morning, and it was through Sunday. Could theoretically Hunter Biden have gone and taken a gun and shot somebody and murdered them and have been pardoned preemptively for that act since it was through the I guess midnight of that evening?
Yeah, what a wasted opportunity. Although
he could have gone on a coke binge.
Right, we don't know yet. You know, the bodies haven't washed up yet. But no, he might have missed that window. But you know what's also glaring in all of this? You know, I write about this in my book, The Indispensable Right, because I have a piece on the media, and I focus on the influence peddling scandal and also other scandals. And the media completely, of course, buried this. And the Bidens were brilliant. I talk about it in the book that they knew that they had to make the media part of this. And the analogy I give is to Houdini. Houdini used to thrill audiences in New York by every night making his elephant Jenny disappear on the stage. And the trick of Houdini is that the key to the trick was that he knew the audience wanted the elephant to disappear. And that is all you need. The elephant never left the stage, but the audience wanted the elephant to disappear. The Bidens knew that about the media. They knew the media wanted the scandal to disappear, and they brought the media on the stage. You know, they made them part of the trick. And ultimately, I think that a lot of people in the media probably were relieved by this pardon because all of the attention on the influence peddling scandal highlighted how the mainstream media itself was a willing partner in this effort.
So that leads me to my follow-up, which is, could this backfire in that, let's say the Trump Justice Department wanted to investigate Joe Biden for his role in all of these influence peddling things. Hunter can't take the fifth anymore. He's lost that right, hasn't he? So he could be forced to be a witness against his father and forced to testify and give up everything he knows on pain of perjury, I suppose, which would be a new crime that he's not pardoned for, right?
Yeah, Mark, I think it would get a bit sporty. I think that what will happen is certainly, I think that this pardon is not the absolute protection the president may have wanted. First of all, if he really wants to guarantee that protection, he needs to start issuing some pardons for his brother, for example, because any vulnerability, any remaining Biden who was key to these deals could be the window through which Congress brings forth this evidence. Now, as for Hunter, of course, if he gets called by the House and he gives false testimony, that is a new crime outside the period of the pardon. He most certainly can be prosecuted. Now, if he takes the fifth, they will argue that you're clear of any federal offenses. And I expect that his counsel would say, well, he's still subject to possible state offenses. But he might be asked, well, what offenses? What offenses would you be subject to where the statute of limitations hasn't run? And by the way, Congress could call his bluff and give him immunity and say, now you've got double immunity. Give us the answers. So that's one of the reasons why it might be tempting for the president to issue a pardon for his brother. I think that would magnify the opposition that he's already facing. But it could make things very interesting for Hunter Biden. The last time he testified, the House committee accused him of misrepresenting facts and possibly committing perjury. He was never charged of that. But on this occasion, he would have no room for error because he would have no possible sweetheart deal or protection in either the legislative or executive branches.
So let's just sort of zoom out for a second. We are in an era of hyper-partisanship. We are in an era of lawfare against our adversaries. And we have not had a president in the 21st century that someone did not want to impeach. Right? It's true, the Democrats against George Bush, then Republicans against Obama. And the natural consequence of that is that presidents are going to use their pardon latitude for ever more political purposes. It seems almost natural. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked not just to see Biden pardon his brother, but potentially even pardon himself. Then we look forward and could see this becoming a thing, a banana republic exercise. What do we do about this? Is this what the founders intended? Is this how we are meant to use our legal system?
No. I mean, the pardon power is based on the greatest values and purpose, is meant to be, as with the king, a final protection of individuals against state abuse. And in many respects, it has worked that way, but in other respects, it hasn't. I've written about the pardon power, and it's rather checkered history. Past presidents have used it to benefit political donors. Bill Clinton, of course, infamously pardoned his brother, even though there was nothing in Roger Clinton's case that would warrant a pardon. It was nothing particularly unusual or unfair about his conviction. He also pardoned Mark Rich, who may be one of the least justified pardons in history. He was a fugitive from justice and totally unapologetic. The President Trump pardoned his son-in-law's father. And we've also had really infamous cases, like Harding was accused of selling pardons with his attorney general. He even pardoned a guy called Lupo the Wolf, who was a mafia hitman. And Lupo the Wolf was sent back to New York, and he was needed because there was a mob war going on. And he went back to kill people. So this is a perfectly awful history. But the funny thing about this is that Biden still stands out in that group because
even with Lupo the Wolf.
Even with Lupo the Wolf, because Harding didn't actually help Lupo the Wolf. He wasn't the driver of these drive-by shootings. Joe Biden is accused of knowledge or involvement in this corruption scandal. Now, to be fair to him, we still need a lot more information. We don't know the full extent in which he was involved, but he has been personally implicated. So what does that do for the future? Well, I've been asked, is this a new low standard? And the answer is no, it's a subterranean standard. I mean, this is virtually anything is higher moral ground than what we just saw. That leaves a certain degree of breathing room for Trump. But does that mean that presidents are going to continue to do this? Probably. There's always a temptation, by the way, after all the lawfare against Trump, for presidents just to pardon themselves at the end of their term for everything, and then you can avoid any lawfare, at least on the federal side. And so that may become a new aspect of what I call in the book the age of rage. I mean, we are seeing our constitutional powers used to deal with the rage of this age.
I'm laughing because Danny has a dog named Lupo. So she literally has Lupo the wolf in her home.
Wow.
Yes, I do. He's not a wolf. He's a German
It just
Shepherd.
confirms how everything in
German
Washington
Shepherd.
comes full circle. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
So
true.
Here's a question for you. So, when Bill Clinton pardoned Mark Rich and Roger Clinton, he did it on his very last day in office. Joe Biden did this on December 1st, I think, but long before, a significant number of weeks beforehand. Was there a reason for that? Like, there were some hearings coming up.
Right.
Was there any, was he protecting himself and his son in any way from other things being exposed, perhaps?
I think he is. The thing is, he had sentencing hearings coming up. With sentencing are these reports. They're coming from the court staff as to the range of sentencing. Those reports often have damaging information. They also didn't want him sentenced to jail. They wanted to be able to say that it was not clear that he would be sentenced to jail, that it's all speculation, and that we don't believe he would have gone to jail. So there's a lot of reasons to be preemptive in that sense. The interesting thing is that people said, well, Trump himself is talking about pardoning J6 defendants, and that's the same thing. It's actually not, for two reasons. One is Trump campaigned on that. So Trump, during the campaign, said, I'm going to consider pardoning J6. So when you vote for me, keep that in mind. Joe Biden lied and said, there's no way I'm going to pardon my son and vote for me. The second thing is that in terms of Trump's personal vulnerability over J6, it's pretty much as dead as Dillinger. I mean, the special counsel is leaving the scene. You have the New York case is about to reach some type of resolution, but he's not going to go to jail for that. And I think that conviction could be overturned. And the Georgia case is falling apart. We just saw Fani Willis just lost a fight over records to Judicial Watch, and things are just not going well in Georgia.
If this can continue to happen, there's an endless cycle of sort of, what about him, right? I was fascinated to watch on Twitter, on X, when Democrats came out to condemn the Biden-Hunter pardon, that the reactions from partisan, random people was, well, what about Trump? Everything Trump did was worse. Everything Trump did was much worse. This is all totally justified. You talk about this being a problem, going back to the time of Harding and probably before. Is there no fix to this? Do we just constantly, to steal from Daniel Patrick Moynihan, do we just constantly define deviancy down?
Well, unfortunately, I don't see any real change because of all the things you just cited, Danny. It is funny how people who constantly reject what they call whataboutism engage immediately in whataboutism.
Exactly. It's so true.
Whenever things like this happened. And they can't get themselves to say, look, this is wrong. I criticized Trump for having family members in the White House. I criticized him over his pardon of Jared Kushner's father. I've criticized him on other pardons. But there is becoming this orthodoxy that you cannot cross the line here. You can't try to maintain a common value that we can all sort of latch onto. This is wrong, right? It's constitutional. The question has never been whether it's constitutional. The question is whether it's ethical. And it most certainly is not ethical. It's an abuse of this power. It's the same way that, yes, I've always believed that the president could pardon himself. There's a debate a good faith debate among law professors whether that's true. I don't find it that close of an issue. I think the text does not have such a limitation, and that would end it for me in terms of looking at it. But the question is not whether, in my view, a president can pardon himself, but whether he should. And it's the same question that Biden faced when presented with his son. And during the election, he made it clear, of course, that would be wrong. And he became angry with people that kept on asking about it and said, I would never consider that. And now we are here again, and people are just sort of shrugging. It's the same sort of uncomfortable, awkward shrug that the media always gives when it doesn't want to pursue the implications of a decision by the Biden administration.
My favorite, Denny mentioned the Democratic reaction. My favorite Democratic reaction was from Senator John Tester, who lost his race.
Oh, that was hilarious.
I'm about to get the fuck out of here. Ask somebody else. That was just absolutely classic. But here's a question for you. Reading the statement on the pardon, it's a full frontal assault on his own Justice Department.
Oh, yeah.
For political prosecution. Didn't he just validate Trump's entire argument about lawfare?
You have the spokesperson, you have the press secretary saying, oh, this is just war politics. And then you have the president saying, this was an effort to get me through my son, and they were doing this. Well, the they was his Justice Department, right? And you'll remember Merrick Garland, in one of his few fiery moments just not long ago, was attacking Trump and others for suggesting that his department was involved in any type of political agenda. And yet it's just crickets right now, right? You have people like Representative Schiff, who years ago said any pardoning of Trump's family would be outrageous obstruction of justice, and tried to pass a law specifically dealing with it. And he has gone into total radio silence. And that's the response of many today in Washington, because they know there's really no justification for this. I mean, you got to go to The View to get people who are actually trying to find a way. I've got like Whoopi Goldberg saying, don't say that he lied. He merely changed his mind. And I would just love to be able to use that in a court of law for my next client accused of fraud, and to say, he changed his mind. When the officers knocked on his door, by coincidence, was the very moment he realized, my God, I shouldn't have sold that bridge I didn't own.
It reminds me of that great Steve Martin routine about taxes, remember? What are you trying to say? I forgot. Yes, I would like to forget paying my taxes too. But what we're talking about in the Department of Justice, this is real. I hate to say it, but look, for me, a lot of original sin goes back to Barack Obama and the weaponization of, for example, the IRS against conservative groups, the manipulation of the Department of Justice against his political enemies and people who he perceived were not sufficiently appreciative of his brilliant ways. But my problem is with all of these corruptions, and they are corruptions, Democratic and Republican, is I don't see a way back. I mean, you who have written about the importance of the Constitution, about the importance of freedom of speech, of the rule of law, don't you worry a lot about this death spiral?
I do. And, part of what I talk about in The Indispensable Right is the fact that we can't resolve these questions on free speech or on these other issues unless we resolve what our values are, the things that define us. And one of the most chilling aspects of this age of rage is that people are questioning the very things that defined us collectively. You have professors that have argued, you have a Harvard and Yale professor that wrote a piece in the Washington Post that said that we have to get beyond constitutionalism. These are law professors, right? You have an MSNBC analyst and Michigan law professor who says that free speech is the Achilles heel of the United States. One of my colleagues is leading to amend the First Amendment. She's leading a movement because she says the First Amendment is, quote, aggressively individualistic. I mean, this is really a crisis of faith. It's a crisis of faith, not just in our Constitution, but in ourselves, that we no longer seem willing to give up the momentary, immediate benefits of politics, to say that this is something we can't do, even though it's being done by someone I like or an ally. We've lost that. And there was a time when we could do that. There was a time when the Moynahans or even the Byrds or others in the Senate would transcend the moment of politics, the immediate benefit, and say, no, we have to really mind the line. Very few people in Washington are doing that today. And you're absolutely right, Danny. In some ways, that may be our greatest crisis. It's a crisis of faith.
What's remarkable about this is that the lie was premeditated. that if you believe the NBC News reporting that they were having internal meetings at the White House to discuss whether he should issue a pardon, and they agreed to say publicly that he wouldn't pardon while they continued to discuss whether he would pardon. So it wasn't even, he didn't change his mind. He consciously went out and lied to the American people that he had made a decision not to do it when it was still up in the air.
Yeah, it's particularly bothersome to see the White House counsel's office involved here. I mean, it was bothersome when they hired Sams to be their spokesperson. This was someone who aggressively and almost daily went out and took a political spin. I've never seen the White House counsel's office ever do anything like that. But you also now have a president who routinely went out and said false things. He said false things about the special counsel's report. I mean, the special counsel's report said very clearly that he had mishandled classified evidence, he had possessed it unlawfully for decades, and that, you know, they didn't think he was a promising defendant because people would look at his mental decline and find it hard to convict. The president immediately went out and just lied about that report. And of course, nobody said a thing. And it is part of this erosion of character that we've seen in Washington. People just pick a team, and we live in this post-truth era.
Is he still in legal jeopardy for that? Do you think that could the Trump Justice Department turn around and say, you know what, I think we're going to look into this case again?
I doubt that they would. Potentially they could, as long as the statute of limitations would not be a problem. I think the statute of limitations would be a problem. I don't think, the funny thing is, I don't think Trump is that eager to do any of that.
I don't think so either.
I think Trump is perfectly satisfied with where he is. I mean, Joe Biden just bulldozed the high moral ground. He just leveled this as a parking lot. And you can't, for an incoming president, it's pretty good to know that if you just stand where you are, you're still in an elevated position in comparison to your predecessor.
So I have an exit question for you in the enough of me talking about me, why don't you tell me what you think about me category. Mark and I have written twice in the Washington Post. And in fact, I noticed the other day that the Washington Post gave it the same headline each time. God forbid we should give something fresh. That Joe Biden should attempt to put a cap on this period of lawfare by actually pardoning Donald Trump. And the argument we make is pretty straightforward, that it's not that Trump needs it. You know, as you rightly laid out, all the cases against him, even at the state level, are falling apart. But to just say, my successor should go into office without this shadow hanging over him. My successor should go into office with this period of legal tit for tat done with. And I am going to do that by pardoning him. First of all, it defangs the Hunter pardon. Second, it is a smart gesture. And third, Joe Biden doesn't have a political career to save, so who cares? As what did Tester say? Fuck it, I'm out of here. Right? What do you think of our suggestion, Jonathan?
Well, I thought it was intriguing, and that was even before I found out that you are living with Lupo the wolf. But now it takes a whole new meaning that's quite disturbing and bleak. But I would respectfully disagree. If I was in Trump's corner, I would vociferously object because he doesn't need a pardon. It's as dead as Dillinger. I mean, the pardon would leave the impression that he was indeed guilty in the view of many. I think his opponents would say, look, he benefited, Joe Biden, protected him from any further liability. He really doesn't have much liability right now. I mean, even though the case was not dismissed with prejudice, it's virtually impossible, in my view, for it to come back. It's just very unlikely. Everything else seems to be collapsing by its own weight. If I was Trump, I would really be insulted by a pardon because it would make it seem in history like there was something to pardon, and he's maintained there's not. I think that you're right that politically it'd be a smart move for Joe Biden. If I were Trump, I would not invite it.
Could you reject a pardon? Can you say, I don't accept one?
No, it's yours whether you want it or not. It's basically what I told my wife. You've got me whether you want me or not. You might as well marry me. And it's with pardons, it's yours. You can say you won't accept it, you won't read it, but it is good when it's issued.
So exit question for me, and it's sort of a broad one, but we're now going into a presidential transition. Can you give us just a short view of the political landscape going into the Trump presidency? You've got Matt Gaetz is not going to be the attorney general, thank God. Pam Bondi is about to be. There's a whole host of legal issues coming up, issues before the Supreme Court. How do you see the legal landscape playing out in the first 6 months or 100 days of the Trump administration? Do you think he might get a Supreme Court pick, another one? Where do you see this all coming as we prepare for the Trump presidency?
Well, first of all, the Trump team has clearly indicated it understands the realities of Washington. It's got 2 years to make the most important moves, and then he becomes a lame duck. Now, I think that he will be less lame than most ducks because he's Donald Trump, and people like Joe Biden had no coattails at all. That's not the case with Trump. He is a political phenomenon for the right. And so he's going to continue to be someone to reckon with. So you're not going to have the usual thing in the House and Senate where they're like, oh, yeah, well, you're not going to be around much longer. Trump doesn't have to be in office to be a major force, and they know it. But 2 years is about where you needed to have your biggest impact. And he was frustrated in his first term in that sense. You had an acting attorney general, in my view, in an outrageous decision, telling her department to stand down and not assist him on the immigration orders. And Sally Yates was lionized for something that I considered unethical. But all of that effort coming from the Department of Justice did basically evaporate the first 2 years of his efforts. They clearly don't want that to happen. Now, on the Supreme Court, there's a lot of speculation that this would be the time for Thomas and Alito to retire. They're advanced in their years. They're never going to have a better situation if they want their successors to carry on their legacy. There's also concern about Sotomayor. I've never really seen that. She has had medical problems, but she's as sharp as she ever was. And I think that I was listening to her today, and she was very sharp, and I don't see any diminishment in that sense. It's certainly not from age. For her, it's more health issues. But the left really pushed her to leave the court. They wanted a younger justice. It was a remarkably stupid and insulting campaign. But fortunately for them, it didn't take off. But he could sure get 2 more appointees. That would, I think, they certainly set a modern record for the Supreme Court. But he also knows that he's got to move quickly. Now, some of the things I'm hearing about what they might be doing, I think are going to be difficult. There's questions about use of impoundment, of not spending money in the agencies. They're going to hit a wall on that one in the federal courts, and that's going to be a very serious area of litigation. So if they want to do that, they should probably just pull that trigger very quickly so that they can get into courts and see if they can actually create some new law, because I think they would need new law for that.
Interesting.
Awesome.
Fascinating as always. And we will absolutely mention and link to your outstanding book, Indispensable Right, Free Speech in an Age of Rage.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking to you all again.
We love having
Thank
you on.
you. We love having you.
Get ready, because we're going to be coming back to you as Trump era part 2 begins.
Sounds great. Thank you both.
Danny, what do you think?
So I wanted to focus a little more on the topic that we talked about at the end, because I think it hasn't gotten enough attention. The Democrats say that Trump is the worst person for our democracy. He's going to destroy our Constitution. It's the end of the United States as we know it. Joe Biden is going around breaking the law, pardoning his son, politicizing his Justice Department. The media is hand in glove with everybody. I've said this before on our show, but there's this decline and fall of the Roman Empire feeling about this, and and one of the reasons why I wanted to write that Biden should pardon Trump piece with you was because I think we need something dramatic to just end these assaults on our constitutional order. And I hoped that Biden might be big enough, what was I thinking, to do that. What do you think?
Obviously I wrote the piece with you, and I believe that, but there's an argument to be made that the only way this will stop is if the people who did this get punished. You know, I mean, there's an argument to be made that it's only if the blowback is worse than the original that you can put an end to this whole thing, because I think the Democrats have gotten away scot-free with this whole politicization of the weaponization of the justice system. And I think it's time that the Trump Justice Department ought to investigate all this. I think they should dig into Hunter Biden. I think they should dig into Joe Biden. I think they should dig into all of these things. I'm not saying that they should prosecute him, but I think there's been, if you just go back and look at the sweep of the effort to destroy Donald Trump, starting with the Russia collusion conspiracy theory, which is what it ended up being, nothing more than a conspiracy theory, that he had colluded with Putin to steal the election, through the 91 different charges that were leveled at him at the federal, state, and local level, the civil suits to try and bankrupt him, the 2 impeachments, one of which much less deserved than the other, but still, only twice impeached president in American history. The sweep of this effort to destroy the man is unprecedented. And the only way you're going to stop it is if there's a price to be paid for it. And so I don't know that maybe my sense is that Donald Trump probably will not. I think that it's actually possible that Donald Trump would have pardoned Hunter Biden. He actually was asked about that, and he said, it's not off the table. If you look at the fact that he did not actually reopen the case against Hillary Clinton, when he could have, when he came into office, and he didn't seek, despite the chance of lock her up at his campaign rallies, that he didn't try to lock her up. I think he wants to go on and be a great president and do things in a bold way, and I think this might be a little bit of a distraction. But the fact that he has made the choices he's made in terms of leading the Justice Department and the FBI seems to indicate that he wants some attack dogs in there to go in and rummage through the place, and if not impose consequences, at least clean those places up to the point that this never happens again, that we root out some of the people who have politicized the justice system, because that, at a bare minimum, people's heads have got to roll in terms of losing their jobs, losing their careers, because it's absolutely shameful.
I don't agree with you about that. I think he should.
You don't think we need to clean up the FBI? You don't think we need to clean up
the
the Justice Department?
I think we need to clean up the FBI. I think we need to clean up the Justice Department, but not in service of a vendetta that is simply the opposite of what the
Is it a vendetta to try and root out all the people who were behind this whole effort?
I think that it is a slippery slope. And what I would like to see is a professional, serious leader who absolutely rooted out politicization from, frankly, all of our institutions, because we talk about the Department of Justice, but that's only because people are bored out of their skulls. If you talk about politicizations at the CIA and the State Department and AID, where where this is an equally big problem that is applied in different ways. So I'd love to see that done, but I don't want to see it done in the service of prosecuting Hunter Biden, and I don't want to see it done in the service of prosecuting Joe Biden.
But I think you need to get rid of the people who I think we need to get rid of a lot of people who are complicit in this lawfare.
I worry about the future of our republic, and that is the problem here. I worry a lot about it, and I don't see the way out. Hey guys, listeners, you got some solutions for us? Some ideas? Some help? Let us know what it is that you think we ought to be doing. And thank you for being with us.
Take care. See you next week.
Let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. You can get in touch with the show by emailing us at whatthehell@aei.org.
Or you can reach us on Twitter. I'm at @dpletka.
And I'm at Mark Thiessen. That's Mark with a C.
Please rate and review the podcast. If you like the show, please subscribe, share it, comment on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this.
Thanks for listening.